Welcome. Today we're exploring the intriguing concept of generational archetypes as laid out by William Strauss and Neil Howe in their influential book Generations. Strauss and Howe propose that each generation follows a repeating cycle embodying one of four distinct archetypes. Their analysis reaches back to 1433, mapping the defining traits of each generation up to the present day. In this video, we'll focus on the most recent generations that you may identify with, namely the silent generation, baby boomers, Generation X, and millennials. We'll examine how each generation was shaped by its era, how its members approach parenting, and their attitudes towards social behaviors such as conformity and rebellion. Before we get into it, though, it is critical to understand that almost all generations are shaped by some sort of crisis. A crisis is a pivotal period of upheaval and transformation that reshapes society's structure, values, and systems. Crises are typically periods of great instability but are also opportunities for renewal and progress. They mark the end of an era and the beginning of a new societal order, often requiring sacrifice, unity, and a rethinking of norms. These crises are seen as essential to the generational cycle, prompting change in response to significant challenges. Let's look at the key characteristics of a crisis. First is urgency. Crises demand immediate action, pushing society to make decisions that might have long-lasting impacts. Second is unity and sacrifice. A crisis often requires collective effort, setting aside individual needs for the good of the whole. Third is institutional overhaul. Old systems and structures are dismantled or rebuilt to respond to new realities. Lastly is the generational role. Each generation plays a unique role. Older generations provide guidance, while younger generations bring the energy to rebuild and shape the future. Next, we will take a quick look at the major conflicts that affected America over the last few hundred years. The American Revolutionary War from 1775 to 1783. This was a foundational crisis for the United States, as it marked the birth of a new nation. The struggle for independence from Britain was not only a military conflict but also a rethinking of governance, rights, and societal structure. This period exemplified the breakdown of an old system and the establishment of a new one, defining American values for generations. Next is the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. The Civil War was a critical juncture in American history, addressing fundamental issues of unity, slavery, and civil rights. This crisis forced the nation to confront deep divisions, leading to profound societal and political changes, including the abolition of slavery and a redefined federal government. The crisis reshaped the nation's identity, particularly around issues of freedom and equality. After that was the Great Depression and World War II between 1929 and 1945. The economic collapse of the Great Depression and the global conflict of World War II represented a period of significant upheaval that transformed social and economic systems. This crisis saw the creation of the New Deal, military mobilization, and eventually a reordering of global politics. It solidified the United States as a world power and established the groundwork for the modern welfare state, as well as the rise of a robust middle class. The latest was the September 11th attacks and the War on Terror around 2001. The events of September 11th, 2001, ushered in a crisis focused on security, privacy, and global stability. The attacks led to significant changes in foreign policy, national security, and personal freedoms. The aftermath brought about a new era in global politics, reshaping American attitudes toward security, surveillance, and military intervention, and leaving a lasting impact on national and international policies. These crises illustrate how society periodically reaches a boiling point, where accumulated tensions and conflicts lead to transformation. Each crisis sets the stage for a new cycle, forging new values, priorities, and structures. With that as our basic overview, let's do a quick overview of the four archetypes. According to Strauss and Howe, history repeats itself in cycles, with four archetypes that recur across generations. Each has a unique set of characteristics that shape how they interact with society, respond to crises, and raise the next generation. Let's go over these four archetypes quickly. First is the artist archetype. Artists are born during a period of intense crisis. They grow up heavily protected and sheltered, which shapes them into cautious, sensitive adults. Artists often bring a thoughtful, diplomatic approach to society, focused on compromise and compassion. Second is the prophet archetype. Prophets are born after a period of crisis. They grow up in a time of social idealism and cultural focus, creating strong, value-driven leadership as they age. They are known for being visionary and focused on morality, often guiding the next major period of social reform. Third is the nomad archetype. Nomads come of age during an era of rebellion and individualism. They grow up under less supervision, making them resilient, independent, and sometimes skeptical. When they reach adulthood, they take on a pragmatic, often risk-averse role in society. Lastly is the hero archetype. Heroes are born after an era of cultural upheaval and crisis. They grow up in an atmosphere of social cohesion and optimism, leading them to develop a strong sense of duty and collective identity. They are known for their team-oriented spirit and leadership in times of crisis. Now that we have a grasp of the four archetypes, let's look at how these archetypes manifest in the last four generations: the silent generation, baby boomers, Generation X, and millennials. Silent generation, artist. Born from 1928 to 1945. The silent generation grew up during the Great Depression and World War II. As children, they were heavily sheltered and raised with a strong focus on community and conformity. This generation leaned towards social order and self-sacrifice, often prioritizing the group over individual expression. Baby boomers, prophet. Born between 1946 and 1964, came of age in a time of cultural revolution and civil rights movements. As children, they focused on redefining society's values, questioning the status quo, and leading a wave of change. Known for their idealism, they were drawn to issues of justice, morality, and rebellion against the system. Generation X, nomad. Born from 1965 to 1980, came of age during a time of economic downturn and social uncertainty. As the latchkey children, they were less sheltered and more independent than previous generations, leading them to be resourceful, skeptical, and adaptable. This pragmatic approach has defined their interactions with society. This was the first generation that people took pills not to have, and abortion became legal in 1973. Millennials, hero, born between 1981 and 1996, grew up in an era marked by economic growth and technological advancement. As children, they are team-oriented and community-driven. They bring a sense of optimism and unity, tackling issues like climate change and social justice with a collective mindset. People fell in love with children again, with car seats and baby on board stickers becoming popular in the mid-1980s. Let's talk about parenting styles and how they vary based on generational archetypes. Parenting tends to shift between protection and independence based on the societal needs of the time. The silent generation grew up under strict, protective parenting styles. This shaped their focus on order, rules, and respect for authority. Boomers, on the other hand, experienced more relaxed parenting. This freedom allowed them to become vocal about ideals, individuality, and social change. Gen Xers grew up during a period of absent or minimal parenting, with less supervision. This freedom fostered their independence and self-sufficiency. Millennials saw a return to more involved parenting, known as helicopter parenting, where they were guided and supported, leading to a strong community focus. Next, we will take a look at social behavior such as rebellion versus conformity. Each generation expresses different levels of rebellion and conformity, shaped by the social environment and the archetypal role they play within it. The silent generation valued conformity, placing a strong emphasis on community, stability, and tradition. They tended to respect authority and approach change cautiously. Disciplined and reserved, they grew up adhering to rules and traditions, often prioritizing family and community over personal ambition. Diligent in their work, they focused on maintaining stability and preparing for a secure retirement. Reluctant to adapt to rapid change, they became custodians of institutional memory, championing security and the continuity of community values. Baby boomers are renowned for their rebellious spirit, challenging established norms and leading key social movements, including those for civil rights, environmental protection, and gender equality. As they came of age, they embraced a growing awareness of the world and their role in it, rejecting conformity in favor of revolution and transformation. Break the system man was their mantra. Passionate and engaged, they pursued activism and later became career-focused, striving to reshape organizations to reflect their ideals and leave a lasting impact. Even today, they remain vocal about their beliefs, often mentoring younger generations while maintaining influential positions in society. Generation X embraced a more skeptical and individualistic outlook, often challenging institutional authority in subtle, independent ways rather than through large-scale movements. They developed a resourceful, "I'll take care of myself" attitude, learning to navigate challenges on their own terms. Focused on career stability, they valued flexibility and independence while maintaining a cautious view of authority. As parents, they often adopted a hands-off approach, encouraging their children to develop autonomy while balancing work and personal responsibilities. Pragmatic and straightforward, Gen Xers tend to prioritize supporting their families and communities through practical, hands-on contributions rather than pursuing broad societal change. Millennials are characterized by their strong social awareness and drive to challenge outdated systems. They prioritize inclusivity and are often engaged in activism, striving for systemic change and collective progress. Collaborative and adaptable, they were raised to value self-esteem and teamwork, shaping their approach to success. They focus on redefining traditional career paths, emphasizing social connection, work-life balance, and mental health. Millennials are reshaping workplaces to be more inclusive and cooperative, fostering environments that align with their values. As they age, they are likely to remain active and community-focused, mentoring younger generations while championing social progress and adaptability. Next, we will look at change, but from two perspectives: those that change the inner world and those that change the outer world. Each generational archetype approaches change differently, with some focusing on transforming internal values, beliefs, and cultural ideals, therefore reshaping the inner world, while others take a more outward, pragmatic approach to societal and structural reform, therefore reshaping the outer world. Here's how these components play out across the four archetypes. Although artists like the silent generation are less confrontational, they also contribute to reshaping the inner world, focusing on harmony, diplomacy, and balance in society. The silent generation, for example, avoided extreme conflict, instead nurturing social cohesion and encouraging respect for diverse perspectives. Their cautious approach to change helped society embrace gradual moral adjustments without upheaval, supporting cultural continuity and peace. As a prophet archetype, baby boomers are a prime example of a generation that reshaped the inner world. Coming of age during the 1960s and 70s, boomers sparked cultural revolutions focused on civil rights, individual expression, and questioning traditional norms. They emphasized self-exploration, personal freedom, and societal values, ultimately shifting the moral landscape. Their energy was directed at redefining the principles of society, often through activism and social change movements rather than altering material structures or institutions themselves. Reshaping the outer world, on the other hand, involves concrete actions to change societal structures, systems, and institutions. Generations with this focus aim to solve practical, external problems, ask questions like, what can we build or improve, and how can we make society function better? Nomads like Generation X take a more practical, reformative approach, often aiming to address societal dysfunctions through adaptability and innovation. Their focus is less about sweeping cultural shifts and more about fixing what is broken within the current system. Gen Xers have been instrumental in reshaping the workplace, advocating for flexible work arrangements and a balanced lifestyle. They approach outer world issues with a skeptical eye, seeking pragmatic reforms over idealistic visions which provide stability and continuity within existing structures. As a hero generation, Millennials are known for their collaborative spirit and desire to effect real-world change. They are focused on restructuring workplaces, governments, and other institutions to reflect modern values of inclusivity, equality, and environmental sustainability. Millennials are more likely to use digital tools to create new systems that foster community and collaboration, advocating for policies and technologies that make a tangible impact. Their approach to reshaping the outer world aims at solving societal challenges by implementing inclusive, efficient structures. So how do these components work together? The cyclical pattern of reshaping the inner world, followed by the outer world, ensures that both values and structures evolve over time. Typically, a prophet generation like the boomers will lead a phase of introspection and moral reassessment, setting the cultural groundwork. Following them, a nomad generation like Gen X will make pragmatic adjustments, while the hero generation, such as millennials, will take on the work of building or reforming outward systems based on these new ideals. Finally, artist generations like the silent generation maintain balance and continuity, ensuring a cohesive transition to the next cycle. Each generation's approach provides a necessary piece of the broader cycle of societal evolution, creating a rhythm of introspection followed by action that allows societies to respond to changing needs both culturally and structurally. Just a reminder that we cannot emphasize the importance of how you were raised and who raised you. This is probably one of the most important aspects of how you will navigate the world. Silent and X-Gens were raised in tough, often harsh environments with little or no protection. Follow the rules and get your opinion out of the way. They were the seen and not heard children. Whereas boomers and millennials were raised in a more protected environment and were told you can be anything you want to be. Have you noticed that there is a very distinct pattern here? Silent and Gen X normally have an appreciation for each other, whereas boomers and millennials get on just fine. Why is that? It's no coincidence. The silent generation raised the X-Gen generation, and if the cycle continues, the X-Gen will raise the next silent generation. The same thing is true for the boomers and millennials. Most often than not, children, parents, and grandparents get on well if there is another generation between them. Conflict can arise in a family if there is no gap, like in a big family where some of the children form part of one generation and the others form part of another generation. The same is true for your children. If you had a child too early in your life or very late in your life, the chances are you might not have the bond or relationship that you are hoping for. I'm not saying this is the case in every situation, so please use this as a general guideline. This also applies to relationships. You might have a partner in a different generation. Learn about their generation, and it might help you understand how they need to be treated. Now let's expand a bit on that conflict. Generations respond to conflict in profoundly different ways, shaped by the values they were raised with and their collective experiences, revealing why some wars fade quietly into history while others are revisited and redefined through storytelling. It's an intriguing pattern, but not entirely surprising. The silent generation who fought in the Korean War and Generation X, who comprised most soldiers in the First Gulf War of the early 90s, approached conflict with a quiet resilience. They went to war, did their duty, and then returned to continue their lives without much fanfare. It's like they were just expected to deal with the trauma of the war. Now consider the Vietnam War and the Iraq War or Second Gulf War of 2003. The baby boomer generation dominated the ranks of Vietnam soldiers, and millennials provided the majority in Iraq. Unlike the silent generation and Gen X, boomers and millennials often channel their experiences into narratives, seeking to process, redefine, and sometimes even rewrite history. This difference highlights an intriguing generational trait: the ability, or desire, to engage with conflict. While some generations focus on enduring and moving forward, others feel compelled to revisit and reshape their stories, often portraying themselves as central figures or victors. This isn't to diminish the trauma or heroism involved, but it does speak to the unique characteristics of those raised in tougher, more self-reliant times. Some generations seem better equipped to quietly bear the weight of war, while others need to find meaning or validation in the retelling. Every generation is shaped by the unique circumstances of its time, leaving behind distinct legacies of strengths, flaws, and misunderstood traits. By exploring the good and bad characteristics, common misconceptions, and iconic figures from each generation, we gain a deeper understanding of how they influence culture, society, and history. From world leaders to legendary musicians, these individuals exemplify the values and spirit of their time, offering a glimpse into the essence of their generation. Let's take a more detailed look at the four generations, starting with the silent generation. Here are 5 good characteristics of the silent generation: hardworking and disciplined, loyal to family, community, and institutions, skilled at saving and frugal living, highly dependable and responsible, excellent at fostering stability and preserving traditions. The silent generation exemplifies discipline, loyalty, and a deep respect for stability and tradition. In contrast, let's take a look at 5 bad characteristics of the silent generation. Resistant to rapid change, overly cautious, sometimes to the point of risk aversion, reluctant to embrace innovation, can be overly respectful to authority, sometimes rigid in maintaining outdated traditions. Their caution and adherence to tradition can sometimes limit adaptability and innovation. Here are 5 misunderstood traits of the silent generation, seen as conformist but were quietly influential in shaping post-war prosperity. Misjudged as overly reserved but were deeply committed to family and community. Thought to lack creativity but contributed significantly to cultural preservation. Perceived as overly frugal but were mindful of resources due to hardship. Overlooked as passive but played key roles in quiet leadership. Often mistaken for passivity, the silent generation's quiet strength and influence shaped a stable foundation for future generations. Here are a few well-known silent generation people. Jack Nicklaus, Clint Eastwood, Warren Buffett, Jerry Springer, and Joe Biden. And finally, some famous musicians from the silent generation. Frank Sinatra, Bob Marley, Elvis Presley, and Johnny Cash. Next, we will look at the highly influential baby boomer generation. Here are 5 good characteristics from the boomers. Passionate and dreaming of perfection. Trailblazers in social movements like civil rights and gender equality. Ambitious and career-driven. Known for their perseverance and determination. Advocates for progress and innovation. Boomers are idealistic trailblazers, driving societal change and progress. Again, in contrast, they also have some bad characteristics. They are sometimes viewed as self-centered or overly individualistic. Perceived as resistant to stepping aside for younger generations. Overfocused on material success. Sometimes accused of environmental and economic mismanagement. Viewed as overly nostalgic for the good old days. Their ambition and focus on progress can sometimes overshadow intergenerational cooperation. But they are also misunderstood as follows. Seen as stuck in the past but are deeply proud of their contributions. Perceived as dismissive of younger generations but value mentoring. Judged for materialism while also being generous with time and resources. Mischaracterized as technophobic yet adaptable to modern innovation. Criticized for rigidity yet capable of inspiring lasting cultural change. Boomers are often misunderstood as inflexible but are deeply passionate about legacy and innovation. Some well-known boomers include Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, and Muhammad Ali. As far as music goes, there were trailblazers in the 60s and 70s, so here are just a few well-known artists. The Beatles, Billy Joel, Elton John, Queen, and ABBA. Next, we will look at Generation X. 5 good characteristics of this often misunderstood generation are that they are highly independent, resourceful, and self-reliant, adaptable to change and uncertainty, and like to learn new things. They are versatile, pragmatic, realistic, and resilient. Champions of work-life balance. Strong advocates for independence and autonomy. Gen X thrives on adaptability, independence, and pragmatism in navigating a rapidly changing world. Again, in contrast, here are 5 bad characteristics of the X-Gens. Sometimes seen as cynical or skeptical of institutions. May prioritize personal goals over collective ideals. Perceived as less engaged in activism compared to other generations. Can be overly detached or independent. Viewed as less ambitious than boomers or millennials. Their skepticism and independence can sometimes be mistaken for apathy. Probably one of the most misunderstood generations with the following traits. Judged as disengaged but are deeply committed to family and practical solutions. Mischaracterized as cynical when they are simply realistic. Seen as aloof but value meaningful connections. Criticized for work-life balance priorities, yet they embrace efficiency. Perceived as unambitious but prefer practical, long-term goals. Gen X is often seen as detached, but they are defined by realism and resilience. 5 well-known personalities include Barack Obama, Elon Musk, Brad Pitt, Tiger Woods, and Joe Rogan. Famous musicians from this generation include Britney Spears, Amy Winehouse, Jennifer Lopez, Chris Martin from Coldplay, and Beyoncé. Finally, we have the millennial generation with the following good characteristics. They are highly inclusive and socially conscious. Tech-savvy and innovative. Passionate about social change and activism. Collaborative and team-oriented. Advocates for mental health and work-life balance. Millennials are socially conscious innovators who prioritize inclusion and collaboration. Again, in contrast, they also have some bad characteristics. They are sometimes viewed as entitled or overly reliant on praise. Criticized for impatience in achieving goals. Perceived as overly dependent on technology. Viewed as overly idealistic or impractical. Sometimes seen as lacking resilience in the face of challenges. Their idealism and reliance on technology can sometimes be misinterpreted as entitlement or impatience. In this regard, there are a few misunderstood traits which include the following. They are criticized as lazy but are redefining productivity in the digital age. Seen as overly sensitive but advocate for mental health and equity. Judged for job hopping while seeking meaningful careers. Mischaracterized as overly idealistic yet deeply pragmatic in achieving change. Viewed as narcissistic but are actually highly collaborative and community-focused. Millennials are often misunderstood as entitled, yet they excel at reimagining norms for a more inclusive future. Some well-known millennials include Mark Zuckerberg, Conor McGregor, Lionel Messi, and Rory McIlroy. Their music artists include well-known stars like Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, Adele, and One Direction. In conclusion, generational patterns reveal the forces that shape society over time. Strauss-Howe's theory helps us understand why we see certain behaviors and values emerge and re-emerge, and how each generation responds to the previous one. The silent generation and Gen X often get along because they share a focus on being practical and independent. Both generations value stability and a straightforward, no-fuss approach to life, which helps them respect and understand each other. On the other hand, baby boomers and millennials connect through their shared passion for making a difference. Boomers' drive to change the world through social movements matches millennials' focus on inclusivity, social progress, and improving systems. These connections show how different generations can complement each other and build strong bonds despite their age differences. Recognizing these patterns helps us understand why people from different generations view the world differently, and it gives us insight into what we might expect from future generations. Take a look at your friends and family and tell me what your thoughts are and if you can relate to this material. That uncle or aunt that you just get on with, or brother, sister, or even your own child who are just so different. Do you think they are the problem? Or are they maybe just in a different generation? Thank you for joining me as we journeyed through the generations. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe for more videos on insights and ideas that shape our society. Share your thoughts on which generation resonates most with you in the comments below.